Welcome back to the Fuck Around and Find Out podcast, Perimenopause Edition, the podcast where we stop pretending our symptoms are just getting older and finally start talking about what's really going on under the surface. In today's episode, we are diving into one of the most misunderstood but most important topics when it comes to fat loss: cravings, bloating, fatigue, and brain fog in perimenopause: insulin. I brought on our resident insulin expert and coach, David, to break down what insulin actually does and why you need it to survive, why clean eating and workouts aren't working if you are insulin resistant, the truth behind nighttime wake-ups, afternoon crashes, and why the belly fat won't budge, and why carbs are not the enemy. They're actually the solution, but still need to be done properly. Whether you're eating 1,400 calories and gaining weight, waking up at night at 2 a.m., wired but still tired, or scared of eating fruit because of what your doctor said, this one is going to blow your mind. All right, here we are. So I wanted to speak specifically about insulin with you because you are our insulin expert, and it's becoming more and more prevalent in women in perimenopause. So I'm wondering if you can enlighten us on, what is insulin, like as just a basic summary if someone's not aware, and why should they care about it?
Okay, insulin is really important. It's a really important hormone that helps move sugars from your bloodstream into your cells so that it can be used for energy and it can be stored for longer term energy. So insulin is really the key that unlocks your cells to allow blood sugar in, which is so essential for energy, brain function, muscle recovery. And I think insulin unfortunately gets a little bit of a bad rap because of this, insulin resistance, diabetes, but we really do need insulin. It is incredibly important.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, what is the difference between being insulin sensitive and being insulin resistant?
So insulin sensitivity is when your body, I guess we'll call that the precursor to insulin resistance. As your body starts having a problem with insulin, generally because our sugars are constantly too high, your body just stops responding well to insulin and to sugars, and it needs to keep pumping out more insulin. As we get into insulin resistance, it's when your body no longer your pancreas can't make enough insulin to move the blood sugar into your muscles and into your liver, and your body starts storing it as fat.
Okay. And that's how it connects to weight loss resistance and fatigue and increased cravings. And what would you say are the main cravings if someone is insulin sensitive or insulin resistant?
Unfortunately, the main cravings tend to be sugar foods, right? We get these spikes in our insulin and then we crash and we get this fatigue and low energy. And our body and our mind thinks, okay, I know how to get that back. We need more sugar. So we pump up more sugar. We eat big carb meals. We pump up our insulin again. It crashes and it becomes this cycle. I call it carbohydrate chasing. You're just chasing it all day, these highs and lows. And there's really, in the end, there's nothing that's going to satisfy it.
It's like a drug.
Yep, it really is, unfortunately.
So it's not just a blood sugar issue, it's just a full hormonal traffic jam, basically, that shows up in the way of constant cravings, weight gain. And what are the other symptoms that you've noticed when someone is insulin resistant or insulin sensitive?
Yeah, so weight gain's a big one, and especially around the belly, which for most people, women especially, it's the worst place for people to get it because it shows so much. Mid-afternoon crashes is a big one. That fatigue right after, you have your lunch, your blood sugar spikes up, and then you crash, and the whole afternoon. I used to find it for me when I was having my issues around 2:00. I just couldn't wake up. So you get that afternoon crash fatigue. Again, the intense cravings. Waking up in the middle of the night is a big one too, right? Not being able to sleep through the night because your insulin is just your blood sugars are really up and down. So it just wakes you up in the middle of the night. Those are really the main symptoms.
It's interesting because I feel like not a lot of us relate waking up in the middle of the night to insulin. We constantly relate it to cortisol, of course, but it is really interesting how your insulin can crash or even spike in the middle of the night. What do you think is the contributing factors to that?
So cortisol actually does play a factor in that. So that's part of it. Stress is a huge factor on insulin, whether it's good stress or bad stress, which we can talk about later, but stress will impact your insulin. And then unfortunately, because people with insulin resistance tend to eat more sugar, they will have I find a lot of the people I talk to, and even myself, you tend to have high sugary snacks before bed, which spikes your blood sugar, and then it crashes, right? That's the only thing that's going to happen. It crashes in the middle of the night, and you wake up because your body is now in this stress state that it can't stay asleep through the night.
I'm wondering, how did you become such an expert at insulin?
Well, so I have two ways, two reasons really. So my wife is a type 1 diabetic, and that really forced me to learn so much about diabetes. She got diagnosed late, so she didn't get diagnosed until she was 35 with type 1 diabetes. And it was a huge learning curve for us. So I had to learn everything I could about blood sugar, insulin, because it became a major part of our life. Aging in type 1 diabetes, especially as a one person, is very challenging. So I had to learn everything I could. The reason was because I spent most of my life overweight. And as I got into my late 40s, I'd spent my 20s, 30s, and most of my 40s either overweight or dieting, trying crazy fad diets, whether it was no carbs, no sugars, intermittent fasting. I tried them all, and I would lose some weight and bounce back up. And I had all the signs of insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome for that matter, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, my A1C, which is our glucose long-term glucose measure, was starting to rise again. And also I'm looking at my stomach. Big body weight around my stomach was a huge sign. So I had to learn quickly how to make changes myself so that I didn't get develop diabetes.
That's really interesting. So it was kind of like you were put into this position that you needed to learn about it, not just for you, but for your wife. And then you're seeing what your potential future could be because your wife is already diabetic. So it's kind of like a double why that you
Yep.
had.
Yeah, 100%. It's learning about insulin it's so eye-opening too. And when you kind of realize that and you realize how important it is, especially seeing it from a type 1 diabetic standpoint, that, I mean, your body responds in so many interesting ways to high insulin. Like I see it with my wife, that tiredness, the just not being able to do anything and feeling like, for lack of a better word, shit a lot of the time.
I'm wondering, why does stress and cortisol and poor sleep make insulin resistance even harder to fix, specifically in women? Or why do you think?
So stress, whether, and again, we can talk about this, whether it's good stress or bad stress, our body doesn't know the difference, right? So a lot of women, particularly, women of our age in their 40s or 50s, grew up with this mentality that high intensity cardio was the way to lose weight. So they are doing these high intensity cardio sessions. Their body is stressed because we're under eating protein, overeating carbs, and under eating calories. So it's like this perfect storm where our stress and cortisol are spiked up during the day. We're not eating enough proper foods. We're eating too much sugar. And it's this like cumulative effect on your body over time.
Mm,
And then, you know what I'm going to add, as we get into perimenopause, it's even worse because estrogen helps your body regulate insulin. And as our estrogen is declining as we hit perimenopause, it just makes everything even a bigger mess because your body can't help itself deal with your insulin.
right. Yeah. And we see this in our clients constantly, right? They're doing all the right things. They're working out consistently and they're eating clean, but they're still inflamed and bloated and puffy and really just stuck. And it's funny because insulin is often the missing piece that is not necessarily addressed on a consistent basis. And I'm wondering, is there anything that you've noticed in particular with your clients that you've been able to implement to alleviate the insulin issue?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I would say the main things that people can do. So eating protein early in the morning. So I like to say an hour after you wake up, having a high protein breakfast is really important. It just sets the tone for your insulin throughout the day, as opposed to not eating and living off of coffee. Not that there's anything wrong with coffee. I love my coffee. I would never tell anyone to get rid of coffee, but you need to have food with it because coffee does spike your cortisol. And if you're already in a state where insulin is an issue, not having breakfast in the morning is going to be a really big factor. Another thing I really love is to walk after meals. So walking helps bring down any type of low intensity, steady state cardio will help bring down cortisol and help bring down insulin. So walking after meals, even if it's a 10-minute walk. When I was really busy working in an office, I would always get up after my lunch, after my snack, I'd get up and just walk around the building once if I had to. If that's all I could do, that's what I did because just getting your body moving after will help bring down the insulin. Not skipping meals is a big one. too many people, and women particularly, will skip meals throughout the day. They'll have no breakfast, maybe have lunch. First meal is kind of dinner. So they've now skipped all these meals, and it's just putting your body in this prime state for insulin spikes. So having, 3 or 4 meals throughout the day will really, and especially balance with protein. So not carb heavy meals, but balance with protein, 3 to 4 meals a day will just help keep your insulin kind of this steady state as opposed to this up and down. Another one, which not everybody loves to talk about, but is cutting back on alcohol. I find that's a huge one. Unfortunately, alcohol is just sugar, right? No matter, there's a lot of other stuff, but it does the same thing to your body in the sense as sugar does. It just spikes your blood sugar. We tend to also, our inhibitions lower and we eat more crap, which
Yeah.
is their double whammy.
Specifically carbs.
100%. Chips, French fries, that sort of thing is a big one when you're drinking. So that's another one. Also, cutting back on the high intensity workouts, so lowering your stress from workouts, focusing more on weight training it can be a big one for insulin resistance.
It's funny, I don't wake up between 2 and 4 a.m. anymore. I don't have the night sweats anymore, but I do anytime I drink close to bedtime.
Yeah.
If I drink within 2 hours before going to bed, that's almost guaranteed. I'm waking up and I'm going to be super wired anytime between 2 and 4 a.m.
Yep. Because that drop in your blood sugar.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I used to track my sleep. I don't know if you ever track your sleep, but if you've ever tracked your sleep, once I got to past 1 glass of wine, my sleep score would drop from the 80s to the 50s. And the pattern was just up, I'm back asleep. Never in a deep sleep, up, sleep, up, sleep. It was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much the only way for me to get a full night's sleep if I've been drinking is if I drink to the point of like getting drunk.
Yeah.
And that has its own repercussions. It's just not middle of the night repercussions.
Yeah. It's next morning
Yeah.
repercussions, which are pretty bad too.
Right. So it's pretty simple stuff that you just explained, having protein first thing in the morning, walking after meal, limiting your alcohol, and eating a sufficient amount of meals and snacks throughout the day so you don't have these spikes and drops constantly. Because those insulin spikes and drops, that's really a burst of energy and then plummeted energy, right?
100%. And not only that, so you get that crash, but what it's doing to your whole metabolism and your systems is really bad, because eventually your body will not be able to handle the insulin from those spikes, and you will become pre-diabetic, and eventually you'll get type 2 diabetes. So we really got to catch that before any of that happens.
Have you noticed any other symptoms like fatigue after meals or crazy bloat after a meal, even if it wasn't very carb dense or gluten dense?
Yeah, if you're in a state of already being insulin resistant, 100%. So when you eat, when your body is trying to pump out that insulin after you eat, so your blood sugar goes up, your body is now pumping out insulin. That's why you get tired. So your insulin's going out, your body's working really hard, and you get that fatigue after eating. So it's usually can be in the first 20, 30 minutes, you get really tired. And inflammation is always a problem with insulin resistance, because the insulin, as your body's pumping out more and more insulin, your body, it really affects your bodies in so many ways that we don't even know. But I see it with my wife when she has to take insulin because she doesn't create insulin anymore. But anywhere she injects insulin, she gets puffy from it, because that is just, your body is now hanging into that insulin. It's hanging onto the sugar, doesn't know what to do anymore. And that's where that inflammation comes from.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions. A lot of times I hear from clients that I get bloated after eating, so I'm going to cut carbs, or maybe I shouldn't eat dairy anymore. Maybe I shouldn't eat gluten anymore. And while we do need to make sure that we're monitoring all of those things and having a healthy balance, I'm wondering, why should we not cut carbs completely? Because I know that we did have a client come to us recently that they had cut carbs completely by the care of their doctor provided nutritionist. And it was probably the worst thing that they could have been doing, right?
Yeah. We need carbs. I know and this is a little controversial topic now these days, because there is the keto people who say your body does not need carbs. However, most people do, unless you can really get into keto and really sustain that for a long time, which I do not think is possible. I've tried, and I'm really good at this stuff. I've tried and I couldn't do it. Otherwise, your body needs carbs for energy. When you don't have enough carbs, you're tired all the time. I can fog. For me, was the worst. When I cut out carbs, that just not being able to think, it was all the time. Because our brain, our carbs, glucogen and glucose, gets stored in our brains. It gives us energy in our mind. It's what helps us think. So we need it. We need it for any type of activity. Our body burns glucose for activity, so we do need it. I think people who don't do carbs will feel it right away. And the problem is, as someone who's cut carbs, when you need it, you will eventually do what I did and eat a whole large pizza in the back of your car while no one's looking because your body is craving carbs and you just like we need it. So not having it is just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. It's just a recipe for failure because, like you said, you starve yourself of it so much and you're constantly craving it. And then you end up eating, like you mentioned, an entire pizza. Whereas if you just would have allowed yourself to have it, you might have only had a couple slices.
Yeah. And here's the problem. This is the other problem, I think. So carbs get a really bad rap too, because when you start talking about carbs, people automatically they're thinking French fries, potato chips. Our minds go to the worst carbs possible, pizza.
Right.
But our minds go to the worst carbs possible. You can have so many carbs that like are so good for you, so healthy, have so much micronutrients, fiber, all these things that we need. And you don't need to get it from French fries. You can have potatoes that are just baked or air fried. You can have rice. We can have, I mean, nuts. Well, nuts, sorry, are fat. Sorry, I was thinking beans. You know, beans are a great source of carbs and fiber, fruits and vegetables. Like there's so many things. And I've had people who've come to me and they're scared to eat fruits because of carbs. And I'll say to them, I promise you, the fruit is not what made you gain 100 pounds,
Right.
right? It wasn't that apple. It's not that handful of grapes. That is not it.
Right.
Carbs are good for us. They contain so many other micronutrients that our bodies need.
Yeah.
You don't have to be scared of carbs. You just
Right.
have to eat the right carbs.
And when you talk about the right carbs, they go so much further. I ate a whole half of a watermelon last night, and it was only like 100 calories for 2 cups of watermelon was 100 calories,
Exactly. Yeah,
because
beer.
just like you said, anytime I think it's interesting because we put just carbs into this bucket of fried foods, like you said, French fries and all the bad shit. But there really is a difference between, I mean, I don't like to label foods as good or
Yeah,
bad, but there are more nutrient dense options.
yeah,
Right. And I think that if we wanted to give a formula as far as how do we determine which is the better carb option, it would basically be something that you can grow, right? If you can grow it, then that's probably the best option for you.
yeah. And the least processed or in any way, right? Like, so a potato, you can take a potato, it's great for you. But the minute you cook it in a vat of oil, it changes everything about it. But a potato that is baked without, all the other additional toppings is really healthy and really satiating and gives you so many good things.
I want to go back to what you mentioned about the role of resistance training and how important that is, especially when it comes to reducing the stress on our body. If someone can't do any kind of weightlifting, what would be the next best option for them if they are focusing on their insulin?
Walking. Walking would be, if you can't do any strength training, just walking. When I started my weight loss journey, not that I couldn't go to the gym, but I was not in a great place physically. And my plan was learning how to eat properly and getting at least 10,000 steps a day. And I just focused on walking and movement, spending, even sitting at my desk, like I said before, I would get up after lunch. And even if it meant just walking around the building, just moving, it doesn't have to be 10,000 at once. You can get 500 steps here, 500 steps there. Just keep moving because it's so important for our body to not, we're not meant to be sitting at desks all day. This is not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be moving and our body needs it. And it will really help it helps bring down the insulin. And I mean, walking and getting outside is so good for so many other mental aspects that just help you in general. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, the
really,
mental benefits are huge, especially if you're going for a walk outside, which is preferable, right? If you're going to go for a walk, we want you to go outside and get the vitamin D and listen to the birds chirping and all that stuff too.
yeah, exactly. Getting the sun is so important. There's just so many benefits to walking. It's one of those things that as I've gone through many parts of my journey to this point, I still make sure I get 10,000 steps just walking. I run a lot, but I make sure that that's separate and I get at least 10,000 steps just with a nice, easy paced walk.
What do you recall as being one or two mistakes that women make when trying to fix their insulin resistance on their own? Like, have you come up to any experiences with your clients or past clients that you're like, oh my God, I wish you didn't do that?
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, skipping meals is a big one. And I don't want to label intermittent fasting as kind of a problem, but in insulin resistance world, it kind of is because when we stop eating and we put this big spread through our between meal times, so 16 hours, 18 hours, 20 hours, unfortunately, we end up overeating. It's one of these things you can kind of maintain for a while, but eventually, like any of the other kind of, I don't want to call intermittent fasting a fad because it's a little different, but you tend to overeat. So, but skipping meals is, they think, well, if I don't eat, I won't raise my blood sugar again. But your body now starts craving food. And the minute you eat, it just takes all that and the insulin starts pumping out again. So we don't want to skip meals. We want to eat balanced meals throughout the day. The other thing is also just cutting out thinking carbs are bad. I mean, and we've talked about it, but that tends to be one of the things that people will do automatically. They hear insulin resistance, they worry about diabetes, so we cut out all the healthy carb. Yeah, I don't like to use bad or good, but things like vegetables and fruits, things that can really help you physically. So it's important to not do that.
A lot of women are afraid to eat more, especially if we're saying we need you to eat not only more, but a few times a day and eat carbs, a moderate amount of carbs. What do you say to your clients when they are fearful of that?
I tell them that our bodies need the fuel to live, right? So the problem when we start under eating is our metabolism is there to protect us. So you got to think of the metabolism like hunter and gatherer days. It's there to protect us. And the minute we start under eating, it starts saying, okay, well, Savannah might not have access to food right now. Maybe she's in a spot where she can't get food. So I'm going to slow everything down. Savannah's not going to be hungry. Any food sheets we're going to store as fat because it could be winter and soon and we're going to need this. So it starts storing fat and all of a sudden your metabolism isn't working the way it needs to work in order for you to get the results you want. You want to lose weight, you want to build muscle, but your metabolism is shutting down. The great thing about the metabolism is it's very elastic. So we can stretch it out, stretch it out, stretch it out, start eating it, boom, it pulls back in and it recovers. All of a sudden, you start having breakfast. Your metabolism is like, hey, what's going on here? This is nice. Start having meals throughout the day and it starts revving up. It's like, okay, I'm going to make Savannah a little hungrier now because we got food. And it starts burning properly. And instead of storing the fat, it's now burning it and you're using it as fuel so that you can do your workouts. You can work throughout the day without feeling exhausted, without that fatigue. And I don't think enough people realize that you need to eat enough food to support yourself. We have this number, it's the basal metabolic rate, that is the amount of calories you burn in a day just to live. So sleeping, breathing, waking up. And if you're not eating at least that, your body thinks you're in danger and your metabolism will slow.
I love that you said that our metabolism is elastic because I as a child just thought I have a slow metabolism. I would see all these skinny kids running around and I wasn't a skinny kid, so I was like, I'm big boned and I have a sluggish metabolism. And this is just how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. But you nailed it. You really can train your metabolism. You're not just born with the life sentence of having a shit metabolism, right? And the best way that we can train our metabolism to be more efficient is by food, right?
Yep, 100%. Fueling your metabolism, that's what it needs. It needs to know you're safe. Once you're safe, and women particularly see, metabolism issues in women are so much different than in men. One of the first things it does when you're not eating enough is your period stops because it's like, you're not in a safe space to reproduce. Like, we can't do this. Your body is really smart and it needs that fuel to really function properly. But you're right. It's not just, people don't have slow metabolisms. They have slow metabolism right now because they spent the last 20 years wrecking it. But we can fix it. That is the beauty. It can be fixed. Like I look at clients, I look at myself even. And when you start off, you need to, their maintenance calories. So how much they would need to not lose weight, not gain weight, might be around, say, 1,600 calories. But then as you start fixing your metabolism, you're working out more, you're building muscle, you're improving your cardio, you're eating better, all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I could eat 2,000 calories and not gain weight because your metabolism is working and you don't need to be as hungry and you don't need to starve yourself just to lose weight, lose fat.
Right. Right. In fact, that's probably the exact opposite of what you should be doing because it's just going to make you fucking miserable.
Yep.
And then also, what's the point if you're not even going to lose weight when you're doing it? Like I spoke to someone the other day. She's like, yeah, I'm eating 1,400 calories and I've gained 5 pounds over the last month. Well, then why are you still eating 1,400 calories? That sounds miserable.
It is. And yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, your body, that's your body telling you something. We are storing this fat, right? That's what it's doing. It's saying we're storing fat because I don't know what's going on here. If you're only eating basically the amount a child eats and you're gaining weight, that's a problem.
Right. So is insulin resistance reversible?
It is reversible. I mean, it depends on which level you get to there. I mean, as you're getting into prediabetes and diabetes, it becomes a lot more challenging, but it is reversible. But you have to make these lifestyle changes. You have to eat enough calories. You have to eat enough protein. I say the other thing, and I haven't talked about this really, but you have to stay away from meals with naked carbs. So no meals where it's just carbs on their own, right? So especially if you're in that insulin resistant phase, all carbs have to come with protein, because protein is going to help your body basically avoid that big spike and just kind of make it a fluid insulin path. So not skipping meals, eating 3 to 4 high protein meals a day, walking, getting in those steps. It's all really these lifestyle changes that are really important. Trying to think what else would be another way, but it's really just that lifestyle. It's changing your diet and changing your movement patterns.
Yeah.
And if you can add in weight training, I know you said not, maybe not, but if you can build muscle, it's really important too.
It's interesting because it really is that fundamental. I think we're all looking for the magic bullet, like tell me something different. Tell me something I haven't heard before. But the facts are you keep hearing just walk, high protein, limit alcohol. We keep hearing that over and over again because it's the truth. That really is what fixes it. It's that simple.
Yeah.
But it really isn't that simple to implement for someone without the guidance of really a coach or a mentor, let's be honest, without the accountability, it's very difficult to facilitate.
Yeah. I love to say it's simple, but not easy. Right. So yes, it's simple, but it takes time. I worked with a coach for 18 months to lose the weight and learn how to eat properly, learn all the lifestyle changes that I needed to make. And it's learning, and it's that accountability, having people there to support you, because there's times when it can be challenging. You're used to eating a certain way, you're used to a certain lifestyle, and having people around you who understand that, who have been through it, really helps in guiding you in that process and making sure you're on the right track all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that this was a really enlightening episode. I learned a lot, and I appreciate your knowledge behind this as well. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I just want to leave it with carbs are not scary. I think that is the most important takeaway. They're not the cause of the insulin resistance. They're a part of it, but if you learn how to eat carbs properly, you can really enjoy life, have good blood sugars, not insulin resistant, and really don't have to worry about your energy.
Yeah. You can get the burger with the bun and the fries.
Again, as long as you learn how to do it in moderation. The problem is we do it a lot, and we need to learn how to do it once in a while.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you, David.
Thank you.
So if this episode made you realize, holy shit, I think that's me. You're not broken. You're not crazy. You're likely just insulin resistant, and you're not alone. The good news is it's actually fixable, but it's not going to happen by cutting more carbs, skipping meals, or doing more HIIT workouts. It happens by fueling your metabolism, managing your stress, and walking with a strategy that works with your hormones, not against them. DM me Reset on Instagram at @sav_tastic if you want to learn exactly how we help women in perimenopause reverse insulin resistance, lose fat, and finally feel normal again. You don't need a stricter diet. You need a smarter approach. I'll see you in the next episode.